We are very lucky to have with us live in the studios Mariah Gilardin, who is the producer and host of TUC Radio, which of course is heard every Sunday morning at 8 o'clock here on Mind Over Matters. Mariah, thank you very much for spending time with us this morning.
Hi, Mike. Hi, everybody. I really appreciate to be on your show. And after having been in Seattle for 2.5 days, I realized that you are really well-loved and well-known. And I believe that's one of the reasons why I'm hearing from Seattle comparatively more than from Atlanta, for instance, where the TUC also runs, or even Chicago.
All right. Well, tell us what brings you to Seattle.
I came to record a conference that's called Who Owns Nature? And it reminded me of all the issues in the WTO about nature, the patenting of life. So I saw the opportunity to update the work that I had done many years ago. And that, also connects me to Seattle. And another reason for coming was there was a film showing that's in distribution through TUC Radio, Michael Parenti's Struggle for History. And when I realized these two events were actually side by side, that sort of cinched it. I decided to really come for both. And whoever was there at that event and who met with me later, I want to thank you for coming, and I really enjoyed meeting a number of great people. And yeah, Who Owns Nature was at Seattle University, and there were quite a few indigenous people's representatives attending. And you sort of got the sense of a second or third or maybe even fourth enclosure movement. We all know how in the Middle Ages the feudal lords took over the meadows and streams and forests that were used by people in common in Europe. And the enclosure movement here of indigenous cultures was, of course, really brutal and rapid. There is sort of spurred by the WTO and by the new set of rules that the WTO set into motion, in addition providing itself a constitution for rights of corporations to do what they please all across the world. As we may remember from 1999, the corporations also immediately gave themselves a Bill of Rights in addition to their constitutional rights to have trade be the summum bonum, I believe it is. The Jesuits call it the highest good. The more rapid and the more voracious trade is, the better, they say. So in addition, they gave themselves these set of rights, and among them are the trade-related property rights. And people then, when they critiqued it, why do patent rights even play a role in this? I mean, it's trade, it's things moving from port to port, or truck to train, or store to vehicle. No, these property rights were really necessary to enclose a whole new area of products that then can become commodities as well. And I remember Vandana Shiva talking about intellectual property rights as they are applied to nature, as they said, to living beings, to seeds, to even us. I mean, some of us know that parts of our bodies have been patented. Cell lines of people have been patented. Women as a class have been patented because we may be able to produce some valuable chemicals in our breasts. I mean, that is not a joke. That's what Andy Kimbrell has written and talked about a lot. So Vandana Shiva summarized it really well by saying that this is sort of a new enclosure movement. After the Industrial Revolution, after the Chemical Revolution, we now have biocolonialism. Now we, you and I, and nature and seeds become the target of patenting. So they're going to possess us as well. And some people at this conference called it, this is a new form of slavery. And I think that's a really, really beautiful description. And indigenous peoples, of course, are mainly the targets, because the biological wealth that is left is in indigenous areas. It's in some of the areas that haven't been logged yet in the Amazon. So that's, it is, in addition to being this colonial movement, it's another first world, third world approach. And I know we're all rightfully really concerned about the war in Iraq, but if you look at the issues here, you realize this is part of a huge war, and some of it is a silent war, and some of it is a war that is not, fought with weapons, is fought with a collector's vial and bioprospectors going through human populations and saying, can we have a little piece of hair from you? Or a little bit of saliva? We're collecting your DNA. So that was a long description of this conference, which intrigued me very much. I'm really happy I came.
Yeah, it's really a part of the big push for biotech, that we're sold in the papers about how it's going to be this new economic engine that isn't ever discussed when they're talking about all the jobs it's going to be bringing in locally, or the new companies they're setting up.
Yeah, it's. I realize that this is, like San Francisco has become, this is a focus of biotech, the biotech industry. And that has a lot to do with patenting as well, because once you take apart a DNA, once you insert parts into the chromosome of a seed, then they say you can claim it as your property, which is a very new and very scary and for a sort of Frankensteinian kind of development, because that question was raised to a lot in many different ways. How, for heaven's sake, can you own life? I mean, these companies have nothing to do with creating it. And, these two issues really clashed for me in an amazing way when Ignacio Chapela, who worked out of UC Berkeley, and who, you're smiling, you remember that program? Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of you listening now may too, that there was this scientist at UC Berkeley, and he went into Mexico, into Oaxaca, where Oaxaca is one of the two cradles of corn, and you can prove the presence of continued maintenance of strands of corn 5,000 years back. And this was done, by peasants, by indigenous communities, without the benefit of any national funding. Actually, in the middle of wars, in the middle of famine, in the middle of natural disasters, they maintained the continuous tradition of corn seeds, corn, the most sacred grain for many of the Central and South American cultures. And Ignacio and his grad student went into Oaxaca to lay down the line of pure corn because they realized that it's beginning to be extinguished because the corns, the natural varieties of corns are mixing with the biotech corns against what the biotech companies have claimed that they don't mix. They do. And to their horror, they found that that is already contaminated. And there's a process by determining this contamination without any doubt, because when you do bioengineering of seeds, you insert a virus, the cauliflower mosaic virus in this case, to show that this invasive thing, this shooting of additional DNA material into the seed, has been actually successful. And they found this cauliflower mosaic virus, and it even has a trademark attached to it, so you can sort of pin down the corporation that did it, and it was Monsanto in this case. And when they brought up this issue, several things happened that are also really scary. But the most incredible was that Monsanto, when they heard that their corn variety, had been found mixed with the indigenous variety, they demanded payment. They said, well, if they're using our product, they have to pay. And of course, the peasants and Ignacio said, you contaminated our fields, like Percy Schmeiser with his, oh dear.
His fields in Canada?
Yes, his fields in Canada.
That got contaminated as well from adjoining fields.
Yes.
And they came along, as they did to him and many other farmers up there, and said, you guys have to pay us because you've got our corn in your field.
Right, right. So that is the confrontation between biotechnology and seed collecting. And, you know, it sort of is enigmatically present in somebody like Percy Schmeiser, who I met several times, and who is one of the most beautiful, principled, quietly steady human beings I have seen. Canola is his grain. I was looking for the name. And you can't grow organic canola anymore in those parts of Canada. So that is a collision course, not only between Ignacio Chapela, who was then denied tenure, and we had to put up huge efforts to get him tenure, and he has it now, but only because hundreds of people demonstrated on the Berkeley campus on his behalf. It is something that, of course, ultimately really, really, really affects us, because this enclosure movement is enclosing our food, and you can't really get more basic. Well, I guess maybe water. I'm going to have a sip of water, but water is being enclosed too. So it's of great concern to all of us. I'm really glad this conference happened. I'll do programming based on it. We need to really all get together and protect our food and our water.
These were many of the issues that originally you produced a series for when you first started TUC Radio. Can you tell us a little bit about what motivated you to start TUC Radio?
You know, it came out of a sad event for me. I was banned from all Pacifica stations where I had previously already been fired for investigating the finances. And those of you who have followed Pacifica or followed it through Amy's experience when she was taken off, while she was a Pacifica producer, she was taken off all of the Pacifica stations by this renegade, horrible board. She had the possibility of making herself independent in a large way, and I did what she did actually prior to her, because I was thrown out several years before she was. Actually, I was thrown out at a really great time in the early 90s. So when I was shocked and sad and said, I lost my access to the air, I realized I became immediately part of a movement for micropower radio and for the beginning of internet distribution. Radio for All are friends of mine. And they were all Lynn Gary, who's Radio for All. You know her, yeah. Hello, Lynn, if you ever hear this. much love and respect for you and your work. So this was a really fertile time at the collapse of Pacifica as it once was, as this really principled voice for peace, and became into this money-making machine for a renegade board. Out of that collapse, a lot of good came. And I was able to take advantage of the early production techniques on a computer. And I wasn't, I didn't need all those quarter-inch machines that I had access to at KPFA. And I made myself independent in 1992. And at that same time, I had always been sort of interested in the projection of power from the first world to the third, or from the U.S. to everybody else. And I had always been interested in this projection as it is done by economic means and not just by weapons. And once I had an illusion that that would be all that's needed, that you can have an economic stranglehold and don't even need wars. Unfortunately, the current administration has proven that wrong, which is another story. But in the context of that, when I became aware of the rewriting of the rules for the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, that then later became the WTO, I thought, no, this is it. This is the instrument for corporate rule. Corporations, which are really, truly supranational. And that's why, some people who appreciate sovereignty, even United States sovereignty, became very concerned about that as well, because they realized that finance, banking, and huge corporations were creating this set of rules that would ultimately supersede our constitutional rights as well, and really have already. And you're probably aware of all these examples where, like, one country sues another in front of the WTO in Geneva and says, they're not opening our markets. The Canadians give subsidies to their lumber industry, so we are suing Canada before the WTO. And Canada cannot say, we may be suing Canada for their healthcare system, because that's an unfair subsidy that undermines the profit motive of the drug companies. And that is in the making. So sovereignty of countries, even a country as powerful as this one, is superseded. And corporations, it's like a rollerball scenario. It's the energy corporation versus the whatever it was in rollerball. Do you remember? One was the energy corporation. One was a precursor to Enron, being a global corporation. Did I answer your question? No, I deviated into. So TUC radio came about in this fertile time, and I was so much in support of micropower radio, and went out with Stephen Dunifer a few times. When he gets all the credit for week after week doing his illegal broadcasts from the Berkeley Hills, and I went with him a few times, and it was a good experience. It's a beautiful experience. That's why I like the fact you have a window here. Can you imagine sitting on a little tarp in darkness in the Berkeley Hills and looking down into the Bay Area and all the lights and broadcasting and seeing where your waves are going, your invisible waves are going. So that was one part. And I sort of dedicated myself to doing only globalization programs, and I kept it up, really, which was kind of curious because it was hard for people to understand. It's a little bit abstract, and I was up against people saying, well, but global trade is nice. I mean, I get cheap VCRs from Korea and cheese from France, What's wrong with that? But I just kept at it in an obstinate way. And, you know, my fondest memories of Seattle are, of course, 1999, when I realized that this huge movement had sprung up. And I hope, I sort of know I had a tiny part in it, because quite a few stations in the end did carry all these programs on globalization coming out of the IFG, the International Forum on Globalization. And no, I had never really seen a movement like this since the late 60s that was so varied and was so compassionately interested in being not self-interested. Because the issues raised by the WTO are really still benefiting us in some ways at the expense of everybody else. Well, benefiting the G8, the industrialized countries, the North, the so-called first world, to the detriment of everybody else. And the beauty of that movement was this kind of solidarity that came up, and the recognition what the impact of what we're doing is on the rest of the world. In addition to also knowing that we are being betrayed too and overpowered.
I had recently watched again a documentary, one of the several produced on the Seattle WTO 1999 ministerials, and having myself spent the entire week in the streets there with everyone else, I was blown away by how much I had forgotten from that. The power of having 50,000 plus other people with you in a major city in the U.S., where for 7 days we were basically dictating what was happening. I mean, and that was leading the rest of the nation for, it was just short of 7 days, and forgetting the power that had. Anyway, it was just amazing to be able, luckily, to be able to reconnect to that through, the magic of video. But, thinking to myself, we really have to, pass this information on back to citizens that, you are not powerless. You just, an example of yourself. You produce this show weekly that goes out to thousands of people that is, got incredible information that no one else is producing and has this major impact. So, and then when you combine that with other people, it's, that's a movement.
Yes, and, radio, I need to make an appeal to those of you who are with us now to take really, really good care of Mike and his show, because I really believe, and I don't think it's a quirk, I don't think I'm just a radio geek. I've looked at this many different ways. I think this is it. This is it. We pretty much have no access to the other media. I mean, Amy Goodman, in a very interesting way, has reopened some of the video connections. And I really like that. And I told Mike already that I started going around with a video camera as well, because it's become so easy now. So more and more of the TUC radio programs will also be there as a visual document, because it's just nicer to use for people. But radio is everywhere, even when small, because we sort of are adjacent to somebody else that's small too. It is instant, it's cheap, it's easy to receive. I mean, there are beautiful examples of natural disasters where everything fails except radio. I mean, you can turn on a generator and get the station on the air and help people figure things out if there's a crisis of any kind. But so radio is really it. And radio is, my experience is that I'm getting calls from people who came upon this by chance, came upon Mike's show by chance, or wherever else I am, and are blown away because it sounds different, it has different information, and people are more and more sensitive to this creamy blather that comes. Just the delivery of commercial media is so, you know exactly where you are when you hit one of those stations. And when you get us, you know, you have thoughtful pause, or hope thoughtful pauses, or you have a conversation. So you need to take care of, especially of Mike in relation to the rest of the station, and of any public radio stations you have access to. And I also want to tell you, you do have a right to request public affairs on stations, which often is a stretch. Music on public radio can be a very subtle form of censorship. It can displace the information that we need. And I really also like, at one point I thought, let's open up the lines and talk, have a conversation. But I know you do that other times. Or maybe we'll do it when I come back. I mean, that is the beauty to the feedback mechanism, that you can actually instantly connect and reconnect. So take good care of Mike.
Well, that's actually a great point in that what you produce, you are an independent producer and you get your sole funding from the people who purchase copies of your tapes. And you have like a stellar website, which just got a new front page, which I encourage everyone to go check out, tucradio.org. And you have this wonderful selection that you've made free to people that people can download of past shows and stuff. But really your funding all comes from the generous support of people purchasing tapes or making donations. And I just would really like to encourage people to do that because, you know, it's a labor of love, but you know, you need to keep a roof over your head. You have significant, I know from my own experience, you have significant expenses that, you know, for production that you incur. Just, you know, none of us are getting health care from doing things like this. So I definitely encourage listeners to support Mariah's work. And you can do that via your website. And you also have like a phone number as well for that, right?
I do have a phone number that's coming up at the end of each program. Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of, you know, hesitant to just give it out because, no, I can. Why not? It's a toll-free number. It's 1-877-882-8273, and that's at the end of each program. And I actually, in the beginning, people didn't download a lot because they were just unable to do it because these are relatively large broadcast files. But more and more people can do it. And I really want to encourage you to do it because it seems like more, you know, rather than me making a CD for you and putting stamps on it and taking it to the post office, it seems a good way of connecting. And a lot of people do. I'm looking at my site statistics and where the downloads, I can see what gets downloaded, not really who. And I just asked Mike, why am I getting so many hits from China recently? And we may have resolved that because they are getting it too. So they may be coming through your show. China, hello China. So I do want to encourage you to download, but I also want to encourage you to send a gift from time to time.
Very good. All right. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. So I want to thank you very much for coming in and spending time with us today.
Thank you, Mike. And all my love and appreciation to you all. And take good care of Mike. And thanks for the welcome you gave me.
We've just been talking with Mariah Gilardin. She is host and producer of TUC Radio, which you can hear every Sunday morning here on KEXP 90.3 FM Seattle and on the web at kexp.org.